Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special event to mark World Mental Health Day 2025. So pleased to be here to support you all. Thank you for those joining live and for those watching the recording later. Hope you find this very valuable. So the theme for this year's World Mental Health Day is access to services, mental health in catastrophes and emergencies. And with the nature of what we do at Karma, we've positioned this special webinar today to focus on the topic of how prepared is your business to manage mental health? So, what can you be doing as workplaces, as professionals working together to ensure that mental health is an absolute priority in the workplace and to prevent any catastrophes, any crisis from happening in the workplace? So, I'm just going to go ahead and screen share with you all. And hopefully you can see that. So this is an incredibly timely topic because we hear so much these days, don't we, about the importance of mental health and that we can all be really mindful of ways to embed mentally healthy practices in our day-to-day life to ensure that we're looking after ourselves effectively. But this is easier said than done sometimes. And there's so much complexity wrapped up in the importance of managing our mental health effectively and such a business case for companies, organizations of all shapes and sizes to be really prioritizing mental health as one of the key pillars of how they support their staff at large. So today really uncovers so many facets that will hopefully well inform you of what the kind of current state is around where businesses might be falling short in terms of providing that robust mental health support for their employees, whether they're aware of it or not, what companies can be doing to embed more of a mental health strategy. And I'm going to provide a step-by-step process for how to ensure that you can put a structure in place within your organization to ensure that you're supporting your staff effectively in this way. So just a brief overview about who we are, what we do at Karma, who I am. So my name is Tanya Diggory. I'm the founder and director of Karma. We are a UK-based training organisation focusing on burnout prevention and mental health in the workplace. We provide a suite of CPD accredited training courses, masterclasses, digital products and events. And everything we do is drawn from evidence-based neuroscience research, looking at best practices in the workplace for supporting mental health, as well as evidence-based mindfulness-based practices and a range of different psychological-based tools to support you and your mental well-being at work and outside of work. So our philosophy at Karma is that a happy mind makes for a happy business. Everything starts with the mind. When you're looking after your mental well-being, the state of your mind's health, it has a knock-on effect on how you feel physically, emotionally, and therefore how you behave. So everything that we do underpins these four key values at Karma. Education, the importance of nurturing your mindset and your well-being. The importance of community, building your support system and your tribe, and connection. Not only cultivating a deeper connection with others, but also with yourself and growing in that self-awareness, because everything starts with awareness. The more aware you are of your needs, how you're feeling, what you need in any given moment, the more that you can put that into practice in work and in daily life in general. Okay, so this is an overview of what we're going to explore today. So an understanding of where businesses are falling short in supporting staff mental well-being, the risks of not addressing employee mental health proactively, and the benefits of implementing a mental health strategy for your workplace. And I'm going to show you an evidence-based step-by-step structure for how to do this. So it'd be great for you to just have a moment to think about where things are for you at the moment, personally and in your workplace. So what do you feel that you're doing to support your own mental health and well-being? And from the perspective of supporting your colleagues, what what do you think that there is in place at work? So what structures are in place? What have you been promoted internally in terms of what support's available for employees? How proactive are your organisation in terms of organising training sessions, educational opportunities to ensure that people have as much information as possible, are well informed to know how best to support their own and others' mental health? What is actually available? What are you doing really well? And what do you feel could be improved? We're going to revisit this towards the end of the session. So we're going to dive deep into the content now. And this question that I've just asked you, and feel free to share in the chat box as well for those of you joining live. This question I've just asked you, the answer may be a little bit different at the end, but we'll see. So just to give you a clear idea of recent statistics that share where businesses are actually falling short, where the gap is, where does that lie in terms of mental health and well-being support in the workplace and the impact of that. So it's not just about understanding what companies could be doing more of, but it's that impact of how it's really affecting employees by not having those structures in place to really support their mental well-being. So a 2023 study by AXA UK reveals that 2.1 trillion pounds was lost globally due to employees' mental health issues. And this is in sickness days taken, time off due to stress, depression, anxiety, overwhelm. That is incredibly costly to organizations. And as I said before, there's a strong business case for why this is so important to focus on. Because, like I said earlier, everything starts with the mind. What we think, the thoughts in our mind affect how we feel physically and emotionally, and then it influences our behavior. So if we're thinking negative thoughts, challenging thoughts, if we're feeling really stressed a lot of the time, that will have a knock-on effect on the other aspects of our well-being and how productive we feel at work too. So stress, depression, and anxiety are the leading causes of long-term sick leave, which resulted in 16.4 million working days lost in just 23 to 24 alone. So that's a really staggering amount. That's just in the UK. A report from the CCLA also cites that only a small fraction of UK organisations, that's 24% from this particular study, provide mental health training to their line managers. This is such a pivotal part of this overall picture that we're talking about when we're looking at exploring the wide context of how best to support your staff holistically and long term in the workplace. Training for line managers and senior leaders is absolutely essential. There is a lot of training available these days for, being a good communicator and, supporting your staff in lots of different ways. But when it comes to mental health, you're not there to be a counselor expert, anything like that. But knowing the core foundation and basics of how to support someone who may be going through emotional issues, concerns, challenges in their life, how to support them in a way that empowers them, what's the go-to, what to avoid, such as advice giving. You're not there to give advice, but you can be there to support them, signpost them effectively, but being mindful of things to say that could be helpful or not so helpful with somebody's state of mind that might feel quite vulnerable, and where those boundaries lie. All of those aspects are so important for line managers to be aware of, because every single one of us has mental health. It's not like some people do and some people don't. Put simply, it is the state of our mind's health. We all have a mind, we all have a brain, we have a physical body and emotions encased within that being. And it's all in constant communication with one another. So, for example, a stressful thought might lead to a pang in the chest or a pang in the stomach, or, tension in the body, or headache that comes on out of nowhere, or shortness of breath. You feel like your breath is getting shorter, sharper, you're feeling more lightheaded, and then emotions are fluctuating, and then that can lead to a reactive response to a situation or anything else. So there's lots of ways that there's trigger effects to what we think, right? And so having that awareness is really, really key, but also looking at how you can support yourself as an individual, whether it's an employee, line manager, senior leader, CEO, entrepreneur, supporting yourself effectively, but also knowing how best to support others is really key to nurture a mentally healthy culture in your workplace. So, according to 2024 research released by Towergate Employee Benefits, 36% of employers only direct employees to resources when they explicitly request help. Now, it's better than nothing, of course. So having resources to signpost people to is really important. However, we are huge advocates at Karma of the idea that prevention is better than a cure. So not waiting for things to get to crisis point before looking at what support is available, because sometimes that's a little bit too late for some people. They're so far down this road of high stress, burnout, worry, anxiety, depression, etc., whatever it is. And of course, there are always ways that people can bounce back from even the most difficult situations, but it just makes it that much harder when someone's further down the line of feeling really challenged and in a really difficult place. So the earlier on that people can become more aware of what their needs are, but most importantly, have support in their workplace, to have open conversations, to normalize that conversation around mental health, to empower people to speak up sooner rather than later, have training opportunities, have, internal communications, have social events, have awareness campaigns that bring about that conversation of well-being. All of these things factor into that bigger picture of supporting your staff and empowering them to feel like they can open up more. And then that can actually be such a big saver in terms of someone's health and well-being, but also from a cost perspective for organizations. There's a huge return on investment that companies have from investing in mental health and well-being training interventions, resources interventions, apps, whatever it is. There's a big return on investment with that in terms of less sick days taken, less time taken off due to stress and mental ill health, and an increase in trust, rapport, and connection within your teams as a result. 2024 research by healthcare provider Benedon Health found that 54% of employers believe they have asked what support is needed, yet only 15% of employees say they've been asked. So there's perhaps a bit of an expectation gap there that's going on that there may not be as much awareness of. So what some people think have been communicated haven't been perhaps as effectively communicated. And again, if it's just about signposting people, human beings, we need a bit more than that, not just one thing or another, but it's holistically, how do you support people effectively? How are you managing your one-to-ones? How are you managing your teams in team meetings? With putting mental health on the agenda a bit more, checking in with how people really feel, if they have any needs that might need a bit of a reasonable adjustment at work to ensure that they're more, productive and supported. It's all of those things, and not just that, having a dedicated support like wellbeing champions within the workplace that actually drive that focus on employee wellbeing and create initiatives for people to connect more. Managers, line managers, and senior leaders, employees given training opportunities to empower them with information to support themselves and others effectively. There's, so much to look at, including a longer term mental health strategy for your workplace to ensure that things are really, really clear, and there's a sprinkling of lots of different ways that people can engage in wellbeing initiatives, because different things work for different people. So just signposting won't always be effective for everybody, but of course it's better than nothing. But we're looking at the holistic picture today. A 2025 survey of 3,600 plus UK professionals by recruitment firm Hays reveals that 3/4, that's 73% of this study, of UK workers have either left or considered leaving their jobs as a result of insufficient wellbeing support. And that's staggering when you think about it. So it's no longer just a nice to have to look at supporting staff well-being, because it affects everybody. We're talking about the human experience, and mental well-being and feeling strong in your mental health is directly linked to your productivity levels, ability to concentrate, to motivate yourself, to give, great energy to your work and other people. They're absolutely intertwined and interconnected. So if as an employer you're not focusing on this in any way or any meaningful way, then you're at risk of your workers considering leaving their jobs or leaving without that sufficient support. So according to Deloitte research, employers absorb around £51 billion per year due to poor employee mental health, with presenteeism being the biggest contributor. That's 24 billion. So this is the impact we're looking at here and the risk of not investing in, holistic mental health and wellbeing support for your staff, your organization. So that is a huge amount. This is just the UK-based statistic here. So wherever you're dialing in from today or watch this later, I encourage you to think about where you're based. What are the statistics in your country, in your area? Like what does it mean for you in your situation? So presenteeism is where you're present at work physically, but you're not really present mentally. And that just highlights once again that when mental well-being is struggling, and when your mental well-being isn't in a great place, that has a knock-on effect on your ability to do great work, to connect with people, to do the best that you can in whatever you're doing in that day. So that does then have a knock-on effect on your productivity, etc. And so if you're there present physically, it's not necessarily going to mean much if you still need that mental well-being support and open conversations to ensure that you're feeling seen, heard, and actually, your line manager, your team, whoever it's relevant to know, are aware that you need support, and that in the long term that will help you feel much more capable and able to cope and apply yourself in a way that you usually do in your work and other aspects of your life. So data released by Bright HR, based on data collected from over 64,000 companies and more than 750,000 employees across the UK, huge amount, cites that poor mental health accounts for 1 in 6 long-term sickness absences, which is classed as 4 weeks or more in the UK. So that is another staggering statistic to get your head around. 1 in 6 people. You think about how large companies can be, even if it's a small to medium enterprise, even if it's a startup. 1 in 6 is such a huge number. The likelihood of it being 1 in 6 people that take time off work for long-term sick leave, and that is due to mental health concerns. Now, the reason for mental health concerns can be vast, right? It can be work-related, but it can also be for various personal reasons. Whatever way you look at it, when you're employed to deliver a job and you've been employed to do that, there's an implication there that you're capable, right? You've been hired for a reason, you're capable of delivering that role. And so for whatever the reason is that your mental health may be affected, it's important to recognize that that can come from lots of different places, but it can then start having an impact on your work, which doesn't mean that you're no longer capable of fulfilling your work duties. It's that you're struggling at that time due to various reasons that have triggered a mental health challenge for you, right? So the more that you work in an environment that has this openness and ease in relation to talking about mental health in general, destigmatizing it, having one-to-ones and team meetings where there's an openness, and appreciation of the value of mental health, people will feel a lot more capable and able to just open up and get help and support sooner that prevents things from escalating into something more serious. Finally, firms impacted by mental health sickness absence suffered up to a 25% reduction in productivity, according to a report from the Mental Health and Productivity Pilot. So again, just really highlighting that point there about how interlinked mental health and well-being and productivity really, really is. So with all this in mind, at current rates of growth, the cost of long-term sick leave is set to almost double by 2030 in relation to mental health issues and concerns. And that's the source there at the bottom of the screen. So if something doesn't change soon, if more companies don't start to really meaningfully invest in a long-term way in terms of their staff well-being from a holistic perspective, then this is only going to keep going in one direction. So if there was ever a strong business case for it, I feel that this is it. So let's now look at the proactive applications for what we can look at to support staff well-being moving forward, and why employee well-being really is the new workplace imperative. So as I said earlier, prevention really is better than a cure. So 1 in 6 people experience mental health problems in the workplace. That's around 14.7%, and 12.7% of all sickness absence days attributes to poor mental health in any given year, right? So that 1 in 6 figure once again. However, flipping the script, better mental health support in the workplace can actually save UK businesses up to 8 billion annually, which is huge. So you're not only looking at the cost of people's health, but the business costs as well for not investing in provisions that can support staff mental health and well-being. And when you do, there is that return on investment there. For every £5 approximately that's spent, for every £1 that's spent on mental health interventions in the workplace, approximately £5 is gained in terms of return on investment for each £1 spent. That's another Deloitte report study outcome. So there is a huge opportunity there to empower your staff and ensure longer term retention of staff. So promoting wellbeing at work consistently and supporting people consistently in different ways, and having lots of different things available can reduce presenteeism, absenteeism as well, and boost long-term retention of staff. Staff these days value more than anything else almost being valued, feeling heard, listened to, working in a place that values people's contributions and each person's individual provision of what they can provide, because every single person's unique. So feeling valued is so vitally important, and there's lots of ways that you can do that. So the sources of these are Champions Health and Mental Health Foundation. So let's look at the benefits of staff feeling mentally well at work. First of all, increased productivity. You're less likely to take sick days or need to take an extended period of time off due to stress and burnout, right? So that's a really, really key one there, that importance of productivity. Improved performance is another one. So workplaces that empower good mental health are more likely to see employees take pride in their work and want to do a really, really good job. When they're feeling supported, feeling valued, feeling trusted, and that they have that autonomy and flexibility if they need during a period of time, especially if they're struggling, for example, that really pays so much in terms of a return on that investment of time, support, energy, etc. So improve performance, improve productivity, and lower staff turnover. So when employees feel supported and empowered by their employer, this therefore boosts happiness and motivation at work. So you're more likely to keep retaining your staff. And the cost of a high turnover of staff is huge for organizations. So as much as you can do as possible to prevent that from happening, of course, can be only a good thing. So when you think about empowering your workplaces, as I mentioned at the beginning, the idea of education, community connection, that's our values at Karma, but it also can extend to values that can support other organizations. Valuing education, training opportunities for senior leaders, staff, managers, to equip them with the tools, resources, knowledge to empower themselves in their own mental health, but also empower others and support people when needed. Building on that community aspect, we are social beings in nature as human beings. We thrive on connecting with other people. So creating opportunities for people to connect, not just on a work context, but other contexts as well, and whether it's social events or other ways to engage or internal campaigns, but just ways to connect with one another. So build that community, build that connection. So connection with other people you work with, but also enhance that deeper sense of self-awareness in yourself through these activities and provisions. Wellbeing champions within organizations is really key, because just as you'd have like physical first aid, you may be aware of mental health first aid as another provision that you can do, but having champions, people that it's almost like part of a committee, like you'd have a social committee or an EDI committee, etc. So having champions to just advocate for well-being within the workplace, people who are passionate about this topic, want to make that contribution and make that empowering change and be part of the team that does that within the organization. They can help to create, implement, and build a long-term mental health strategy and policy with support from HR and the exec team, for example. We've worked with a lot of companies in this way, and very often when companies do embed this part of the longer term strategy, as well as training opportunities for staff, it really, really does create such a return on that investment, and that long-term meaningful outcome where people feel a lot more connected. It has reduced sick days, it has reduced high turnover of staff when we've worked with companies in this way as well. So there is always that opportunity to embrace that and to see how that works for your company. Induction process and signposting as well. So utilizing the induction process when someone's starting at work to highlight your company's stance on mental health and well-being. If you have a policy in place about it, what do you advocate for? What do you feel is important in terms of supporting staff well-being? So any online materials, you also have resources and links to well-being support, so that is advocated for and shared regularly too. Like we said, it's looking holistically, not just one thing or another, but how can you support your staff in a really meaningful way? And very often these days, people want to know upfront what the benefits are, of course, of working within a company, right? So one of the many benefits you can share is this is how we support staff wellbeing, and that's often very well received too. So coming towards the end of this session now, let's look at what drives an effective mental health strategy at work. And I encourage you to also think about the context for you in your organization where you're currently working, or if you run a business and have a team. What does this mean for you, and what do you already have in place that complements what I'm about to share? And are there any gaps that you think could really make a big difference in terms of team connection? So change can absolutely start with just one person. So if you're sitting there a bit concerned that you have this drive, you have this ambition to make meaningful change around staff wellbeing in your workplace, but you're just not sure it will be taken as seriously or who to go to, it just has to start. Just making that initiative to start is the key. And it can just begin with one person having that conversation, taking initiative to put forward a proposal, speaking to the right people, asking who the right person is to speak to about this. So, really, really remember that as well. So it can always just start with one person. Communication, choose curiosity. So thinking about how you communicate with your staff, everybody has different ways that they communicate. So respecting that is really, really important. But of course, there are going to be stresses that pop up. There's going to be things that come up that can be challenging to deal with from a work project-based perspective. And sometimes communication and our style of communication can become a bit heightened, or people misunderstand one another, or misinterpret, etc. It's a natural human experience. But if we start to take the stance of curiosity, so it's easy to just react, it's easy to just, have a conflict, or, when something's been misunderstood, for example, but to take a step back first and foremost, if and when that happens, and just say, can you tell me more about that? Let's explore this a bit further. And just choosing that approach of being curious about what's being said, being curious about what's happened, or happening, and saying, okay, yeah, I acknowledge like this is stressful, this is worrying, or you feel a certain way, whatever it is. But let's try to step back and look at this from a curious perspective, because that can also be from a kind place, rather than just a reactive place, which is the natural thing to do when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, or to feel. And looking at your one-to-one and team meetings, these are golden opportunities to build trust, build rapport with your team. If you manage a team, for example, or if you work in HR, learning and development, and you interact a lot with staff that come to you for support, whatever the context is, having an opportunity to put mental health on the agenda can make a huge difference. So in your one-to-ones, not just checking in about how they're doing with their work, but how are they in themselves? And are there any other things that they need, any other levels of support to ensure that they're feeling in good health and in a good way at work, and in general? And then with the team meetings, an opportunity to connect your teams together, even if it's just opening with a question each time, not going straight into the content of work, but just saying, how are we all doing in our well-being this week? Just opening up that question will set a role modeling tone, that speaks to staff, in a way that empowers them to think about themselves as well as others, because it is a selfless act to take time for yourself and to look after yourself. It's the opposite of selfish. When we take time to replenish our energy levels, do something for our well-being, reset, recharge, we're in a much better position to be at our best for ourselves, but also to be at our best for others around us. So it creates a positive ripple effect when you think about it in that way. So if you're leading a team meeting, it can be a really empowering tone to set at the beginning, to say, let's just take a few minutes, either talk to each other in pairs, or let's open up the discussion. What are you doing for your well-being this week? And if you haven't thought about it, now's a great opportunity to think about it. Having little reset points in the week will help to ensure that stress levels are managed a bit better as well, and you can feel more effective in your work and daily life in general. So having flexibility and autonomy is so important to empower others with. So whether it's that, because remember, everybody's needs are different. So yes, you're all there working in different roles and in different ways to achieve different goals for your company. But at any given time, especially if someone is struggling or might need a bit of support, everyone's needs are different. They're unique to them. So having that approach of bit of flexibility, empowering autonomy, because micromanaging doesn't necessarily really inspire people. Especially as adults, you want to feel empowered that you've been hired to do a good job and you're trying to do the best that you can. What can you do to support others in a similar way, in empowering them to also share what they think they might need and what reasonable adjustments might help, etc. But empowering them to remind them that they do a good job, or they can do a good job even if they're going through a difficult time, and what can I do to support you? That kind of conversation. A key mental health awareness day. So, today we are here gathered together to recognise and mark World Mental Health Day, which happens every October on the 10th. So whether it's this date, whether it's Mental Health Awareness Week in May, whether it's Stress Awareness Month in April, if it's Time to Talk Day in February, there's so many dates sprinkled throughout the year that recognise and highlight the importance of mental health. And so that can be a great way to mark different opportunities to connect with your staff, different internal campaigns, awareness opportunities, training opportunities, to sprinkle in different things throughout the year that keep the message of empowering employee mental health at the center of your strategy at work. And it's consistency that's so key. It's great to have a one-off webinar here and there, but what are you doing consistently to support your staff? And, social events outside of work is also a great way to do this. We're all complex human beings with busy lives and lots going on. And it's not just about, being productive all the time at work. Actually, who are we as humans and what do we enjoy doing? And the importance of just relaxing and switching off for a while and connecting together in a social setting. That really helps build trust, build rapport as well, but also connects people on a deeper level. And that really supports team health too. So I hope you found that useful. Now let's go back to that initial question that I asked. What are you already doing really well in your organization to support mental health in the workplace? And what do you think could be improved? So you might have similar answers to what you shared or wrote down at the beginning. And it might be that there are a few changes that you've thought about or noticed as you've gone through this webinar with me. And after sharing different stats, different insights, and a step-by-step approach for how to embed a long-term mental health strategy in your organization, there may be other ideas that perhaps are sparking in your mind and that would be really encouraged to write down. So the more aware we are, the better it is, right? So aware of your own needs, your own levels of support that really nurture your mental health and well-being, but also aware of what could be really impactful and create a lot of meaning within your organization too. So do write this down, make some notes. And if you're watching the replay, of course, you can pause and take some time to write things down. There's no rush. And for those of you joining us live today, take your time to write things down now. And perhaps if you can take a few more minutes once this is wrapped up now, even to just continue, that would be great. So we'd love to stay connected with you as always. You can find further inspiration, insights, and research on our blog. We have over 150 articles on our website with all sorts of approaches and topics around stress and burnout at work, preventing it from escalating, mental health at work, reducing anxiety, mindfulness. So there's so much content on there. Please do go have a look. We also have a podcast called Take Regular Breaks. It's the Positive Mental Health Podcast, and we have 3 seasons and 40 episodes to explore there as well. I host it and interview some incredible people. Like everyone I've interviewed, I've felt so inspired by it, and they all explore lots of different aspects of supporting mental well-being in business and in life in general. And we're on social media on LinkedIn and Instagram, so do connect with us on there too. It'd be great to stay connected moving forward. So all that's left to say is a big thank you for joining, whether it's live or watching the recording. And as we always say at Calmer, here's to your inner and outer success, not just what people see on the outside, but what's also going on the inside. So thank you so, so much. I hope that you found lots of value from joining today and watching the replay. And any questions that you have, any other things that we can do, any way that we can support you and your organization, please do get in touch. Find the contact page on our website and drop us an email. And we'd love to support you in any way that we can. So happy World Mental Health Day, and I wish you all the best moving forward. Thank you, everyone.